And recording. All right, so it looks like we are live. So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us on another episode of Awakening Consciousness with Ash and Jesse. We've got a great show for you today. We're going to be talking about the Fifth Circuit. I think it's the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals freezes Biden's mandate. I think they are putting a stop to the OSHA requirements for the V mandates and what that is, what's going on there. And I think that in some cases they say, oh, well, I don't care. We're just going to go along with it anyways. And so what does that say about the functioning of the government structure within this country? It seems like everything, all the institutions are crumbling, including government and the trust and belief in government, and what implications does that have? And then we're also going to be touching on the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. So that was a big case coming from, I think it was last summer. There was some riots in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Kyle Rittenhouse, at least on video, appears to be attacked, and it seems like it was a clear case of self-defense, and there's sort of two stories coming out on that. And so, yeah, we're going to get into that. But before we do, I'd like to take a second to focus our energies and intentions on the community that we're trying to build here. We're trying to build a community of like-minded people to grow, survive, and thrive together in the new world to come. I see a world of great positivity and optimism. And as long as we are in the right place, meeting the right people, and doing the right things, I see a real bright light at the end of the tunnel. And things could appear to be in a dark state right now, but if you tune your mind, tune your tuner to a different frequency, to the frequency of the people who are rising through this and building better lives for themselves, I think everyone can see the light and optimism at the end of the tunnel. So thank you for that. And anything to add before we get started other than, so we're on our backup channel, 2 strikes on our main channel. That we're going to be able to go live on and upload on our main channel starting on Monday. So that's good. We're out of YouTube detention. And but long-term, our plan is to make our home over on our Rumble account. So we put those in the chat. And anything to add before we get started?
No, that was a good intro, man. I really agree with the perspective and the optimism.
Awesome. Good morning, Brian. Oh, love and gratitude to all from us. Yes. Thanks. And let's get started. So, let me share my screen. All right. So the U.S. Federal Appeals Court freezes Biden's V rule for companies. So November 6th, so we're a little late to the party, but we took a little time off. The U.S. Federal Appeals Court issued a stay Saturday, freezing the Biden administration's effort to require workers at U.S. companies with at least 100 employees to be injected against C-19 or be tested weekly, citing a grave statutory and constitutional issues with the rule. And go figure. The ruling from the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit comes after numerous Republican-led states filed legal challenges against the new rule, which is set to take effect on January 4th, which was actually, they extended that out. So they were trying to get it pushed through sooner, but it was extended out, and it's sort of showing chinks in the armor for the government, and pushback and people standing up and saying no. We've seen this from a bunch of companies. Southwest Airlines, after they had their bout of bad weather, They were forced to go back on what they were doing, and many other companies as well.
Oh, the weather ended the mandates.
Yeah, it's funny how that works. In a statement, Solicitor of Labor Seema Nanda said that the Labor Department was confident in its legal authority to issue the rule, which will be enforced by the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA. So it's also funny how these articles, they'll tell you sort of what happened, but then they'll go into all the justifications and all the ways that it could be justified, and that it's still a good thing to do, even though that it was in the author of the article's opinion like a temporary thing. But just by the language of this article, it definitely you can kind of tell what side the author and the publication is. I mean, this is from the Rothschild-owned Reuters, so there's that. OSHA explicitly, the Occupational Safety and Health Act explicitly gives OSHA the authority to act quickly in an emergency where the agency finds that workers are subjected to a grave danger and a new standard is necessary to protect them, she said. We are fully prepared to defend this standard in court. And so, well, okay, so define grave danger. Are we in grave danger from a virus that doesn't exist? So there's that.
That was our third strike.
Right. So there's obviously a bunch of holes in this. It obviously rests on there needing to be a quote unquote pathogen that's dangerous and could kill us all. So there needs to be that. And of course, there's literally no evidence that exists, and there's a lot of evidence that it doesn't exist. And so, yeah, so we're sort of grappling with this unreality here, where we're trying to build, or they're trying to build a narrative based on many false premises, and we're continuing to see chinks in the armor and further extensions out of what they're trying to roll out. And it shows that there is a lot of pushback. It shows that they don't really have the legal standing that they at least portray that they have. And it shows that people are standing up and saying no. And it's important to know that it's only gonna be a certain amount of time for them to do this. They tried to roll these things out so quickly that there wasn't any time for people to sort of get their bearings, figure out what was really going on, and then stand up and say no. They wanted to just roll through everyone and get it done as quickly as they can, and literally scare people into doing this. And so in the article here, it says on an average of 1,100 Americans are dying daily from C-19, most of them unV'd. And so it's just a complete nonsense. The tests are faulty. We've gone over that. The virus doesn't exist. We've gone over that. And it's a narrative built on many different false premises, all of which could be, kicked out if we were allowed to say it. YouTube, Facebook, the rest of the social media networks don't allow for this type of conversations to happen. And so, they're trying to pull it over on the people before they wise up to it. So there you go.
Yeah, that's a very good explanation. It reminds me of this meme that I saw. It said something like it said something like, I feel like the last 2 years have consisted of people convincing me to be scared and being mad at me because I'm not. That's kind of the paradigm we're in. It's interesting because going back to the circuit court and the actual decision, right? I'll never forget when I was in college, and I was very brainwashed, totally hardcore lefty. And I was taking a class that I really liked. It was a law class. It was on, I think it was on Supreme Court decisions, but anyways, it was the law class. And we kept going over these Supreme Court decisions, and we kept defining them as, was this decision a decision that the left would make or the right would make, or was this decision made, by the left or by the right? And that was how the conversation went. And I remember having this heated sort of exchange with the professor and with the class, even then, right, being totally brainwashed at that time, because I saw this recurring pattern where each case that was decided on the side of power, right? It wasn't a left-right thing. It was an agenda thing. I didn't understand that at that time. I didn't understand it was an agenda thing. But I'm sitting there going, what are these guys talking about? Like, this case that they're saying was decided for the left is in favor of corporations and government. This case that they're saying was decided for the right is in favor of corporations and government. The powers that be are winning every case. And these guys, of course, are caught in the left-right paradigm, thinking they won one and lost that one, and won this one and lost that one. And so I bring that up just as part of the conversation about, is the fix in or not, right? Because to me, it seemed at that time in 2005 or something, the fix was in, right? It was like whatever the case was, it was going to be decided in favor of the powers that be. And so one of the tactics that they use very frequently to get their agenda moved through is they put it out, get the pushback, drop it in some capacity, right? Maybe it's temporary, maybe it's just change the language, whatever, but they make an adjustment, they drop it, and then they come back in a different way. And they get it through. They use whatever power they have to get it through. So I don't know if this is just that. Certainly there is pushback, and that's phenomenal. And you outlined that, and I very much agree. Like, the pushback is there, and that is part of the equation. Excuse me, for sure. We're also in this time. You use the word, chinks in the armor, which I had actually written down the same phrase, where we are seeing people who you wouldn't expect, companies you wouldn't expect, organizations you wouldn't expect, blow the whistle, right? Come out very strongly against what's taking place. You're seeing that across the board, right? You're seeing it all over the medical industry, the scientific. I know, buddy. You gotta be quiet right now, but okay. Mommy had that. I know, buddy. I'm recording the show, my friend. What do you want? Mommy, this? No, she can't have that. Daddy's using it. All right, go ahead. I gotta deal with
this. Sorry about that. But yeah, we are seeing. I think the people doing what you wouldn't expect has extended to just about everyone. So right now you have the left, which is basically aligned themselves with the drug manufacturers and corporations, and it's a 180-degree change from where they used to be. Back in the early 2000s and before that. The left was all about, power to the people, and, corporations should be checked and monitored and their power checked, and what they're able to do needs to be sort of reeled in, and they need to be stopped from taking over the world, essentially. That was true. They sort of identified the military industrial complex, they identified the banks, there was the big Occupy Wall Street movement, but now that this has rolled out, they've made a complete 180. They're totally in bed and on board with the big tech agenda, with the pharmaceutical agenda, even with the military industrial complex. The only time that they really cheered on Trump was when he was bombing Syria. And it's a complete 180 and totally different from what you would have expected, given their sort of stated belief system. And, it's not playing out in real life. when you look at what's actually going on.
Yeah, 100%. Sorry about that interruption. Yeah, so so it's interesting to me, what are we looking at, right? Are we looking at just the tactics, or are we looking at legitimate pushback that's stopping them from doing stuff? I actually lean to the latter. I think we're seeing, amazing pushback all over the world, and as predicted by a lot of people, as the system breaks down, we're going to see, and we're seeing now a lot, more and more people in positions of power, in positions of authority, in positions of, those sorts of positions, blowing the whistle. And part of the reason you're seeing that is because the power dynamics are shifting. Yes, people are being threatened, basically, right? Like threatened into that, into having to stand up. So a lot of people are answering that call, and that's beautiful. Not, being pushed, their backs up against the wall, they're rising up. So there's that, there's that piece of it, but there's also the piece of it that the power structure is collapsing. People can see that there's something new being created that's better, and so that makes it easier, right, to jump ship and to kind of come down on the right side of things. Let's see, there was one other thing. Yeah, the optimism. So I had a conversation yesterday with a friend, not someone I've known a long time, but we've kind of become friends. We've become friends in a short period of time, and we had lunch together yesterday to talk about investments and other things. And we ended up sitting there for a long time talking. And one of his big things that he wanted to, that he was mentioning, was that he felt like, and I don't feel this way at all about this area, but he felt like, he's new to this area, he felt like a lot of people are here sort of escaping something, right? Sort of from that fear paradigm, as opposed, and he's not into that, right? It's like, he doesn't rock with that. And he doesn't like it. I don't know if he explained to me why, but that's not his thing, right? He's looking at it how me and you look at it, right? Of all of these amazing opportunities, this incredible opportunity to shift, to change, to create, to build something new. And so your point in the intro, or going back to, the optimism, that's a very important point. So seeing the opportunity, seeing that the collapse means we can build what we want, and staying in that paradigm is important, because if you're, as I was discussing with my friend yesterday, like if you're creating, whatever energy space you're creating out of is going to be reflected in the results. So if you're creating something out of fear, that's going to have a certain result. If you're creating something out of passion, out of this joyful passion for whatever you're trying to accomplish, with highest good, with good intentions, all this sort of stuff, you're going to see a very different outcome. So to me, it's a very, you did a great job today, sort of characterizing that attitude, or that perspective that people need to have. And I think that might be the most important thing right now, along with sovereignty, is maintaining that understanding that just because, it looks dark on the television, it isn't at all. And what's happening is we're shifting into a new paradigm where humans, real, like activated, alive humans, actually do have the power on Earth. And that's fun and amazing. And if you can see that and create from that, then the magic really, really starts.
Yeah, and it's because we always did. It's just we didn't know it or use it. And
yeah,
it goes back to that meme of that politician on a cliff, on a board hanging over the cliff, and all the people need to do is walk off, and he falls over, or falls off the cliff. And so it's recognizing that power, and then standing up and using it. Because the system can't function without people moving the cogs, without the people moving it forward. And if people say, okay, well, I'm not coming into work then, at some point, people are going to have to look at profits and the viability of their business, with losing employees, losing customers, losing people and other things. Like, they're going to have to make a decision on whether or not they continue with this agenda. And like in all places, it's there's places that are worse than others. And so, there's a kind of great migration going on right now to move to a better place if you're in a bad place. So yeah, let's in that vein, let's see what's going on in Vermont, unless there's anything else you want to add.
Yeah, one other quick point. Two things. So the 5D chess idea, which kind of came out of Q in that movement, but it's an idea that appeals to me. And here's why. We're in this war, but the terms of the war are not declared, right? So we have this power structure, we have this whatever trying to own us and kill us, basically, right? They're trying to enslave us, and they're trying to also kill a lot of us, and that's their not stated intentions, right? So semi-stated, they put it out in lots of different ways, but not overtly, not openly stated. Then we have the other side who's fighting for freedom, fighting for sovereignty, fighting basically for their right to exist, right? For their right to remain organic, to remain human, to remain flesh and blood and soul and spirit and all these sorts of things. So that's the battlefield, but none of this is stated. So it's like this 5D chess game where everybody's just maneuvering, mostly energetically, somewhat legally, but it's sort of, can they get their power structure, good enough so that it can convince the undeclared war victims, right, to go along with it. And then the other side is like, well, we can't just say they're trying to kill us and, we have to murder them. That's not the game, right? The game is, can we get our power structure, our base, our vibe, our, the community, the connections powerful enough to defeat this agenda? Even though, 60, 70, 80% of the world humans have no idea that, any of this is going on. So it is very much this 5D game of chess where through free will, through the rules of sovereignty, there's this incredible battle going on that most people have no idea is even taking place. And so then you get into all that sort of play, right? Of like, are they is this a tactic, or is this the pushback? And, and that's all interesting stuff. The last piece I just wanted to mention was the OSHA piece. Whenever tyrants take over, there's a playbook. It's the same playbook always, because it's the same tyrants. And they always take seemingly benign institutions and make them into this sort of militarized kind of enforcer of whatever garbage they're doing, right? So health and safety, right? OSHA, workplace safety, that's what they are, right? And so that sounds, workplace safety, that's good, right? We want to be safe. We don't want to get hurt at work. We want to work in safe conditions and these sorts of things. So it already has a good sort of mental appeal to people, health and safety, so they're going to be the enforcers of this, and they'll use that sort of benign sounding institution, previously benign institution, although they did cause a lot of problems in construction and other things over the years. But the seemingly benign institution is now going to become, like the brown shirts type deal. And that we always see that. So this is par for the course.
Yeah. And it's like they call it a certain thing so that it can do its work without people questioning it. It's like, but it's for health and safety. So why would you question it? That's what they're for. And it's like, yeah, people think, well, no child left behind, so we're not going to leave children behind. That's a good thing. And it's like, no, that had nothing to do with the law and what's actually in it and all the misaligned incentives that are being set up and all that stuff. So, they use word tricks to fool people. And so this is another case of that. So yeah, let's.
Yeah, I mean, like this real quick, like what was it, the 13th Amendment that freed the slaves? So, but what it actually did was make everybody citizens under the, under their set of rules, and made us all subject basically to this, to everything we're living through now.
Yeah,
So
there's some weird stuff going on with I remember Kanye West, he mentioned something about it where I think it actually legalized slavery, not made it illegal. Like if you're in prison, you can be forced to do, manual labor for $1 an hour. And, and now we have a private prison industry thanks to the Clintons. And, a lot of manufacturing is done in the private prison system. And, it's just, and the 13th Amendment, which is commonly thought of as ending slavery, is actually not that. I forget about that, and I looked into it at one point, and it was like, oh wow, yeah, I'm seeing what they're doing. Anyways, so we have, whoops, sorry, let me share my screen again. And Vermont. So Vermont is one of the most VE'd states in the country and has served as a model for its C-19 response throughout the pandemic. But now the state is experiencing its worst C-19 surge yet. Gee, I wonder if the injections had anything to do with that. With several factors, including its own success.
They don't, actually. They have nothing to do with it.
Yeah. In Vermont, nearly 72% of its residents are fully VE'd, more than any other state, according to the CDC. At the same time, it has the 12th highest rate of new C-19 cases over the last week. Vermont has seen a significant increase in C-19 cases in the past week, said the commissioner of the state's Department of Financial Regulation during a press briefing. The 7-day average for C-19 cases rose 42%, according to this data. Vermont does more testing than any other state, though testing only increased 9% during the same period. The statewide positivity rate also increased 30%, with a 7-day average positivity rate just under 4%. The number of new cases increased by nearly 700 in the past week, the official said Tuesday. We just haven't previously seen an increase in terms of that raw number of cases during the pandemic, noting there were just over 2,100 cases reported for the week in Vermont, one of the least populated states in the country. So, I mean, there's a whole bunch of sort of erroneous things mentioned here. There's no way the tests are faulty. And how do we know that people aren't getting sick from taking the injections as opposed to a virus that doesn't exist? Obviously here they're doing mandatory vaccines at the Brattleboro Food Co-op, which I've been to, and I'm sure you have as well.
Mandatory mask, it looks like there.
Yeah, Brattleboro Food Co-op.
Yeah, man. The great state of Vermont. I grew up in Vermont. What a sad thing, man. But it's the state, of course, that produced, Bernie Sanders, and that, that whole political ideology is very, very strong there. It's interesting to me, right? Because they have, the whole game is rigged to show less cases once people are jabbed, right? You get jabbed, then for 14 days you're still considered unjabbed after you're jabbed. So those numbers are not in there. They lowered the cycles for the PCR test as soon as Biden got into office, which of course coincided with the large scale rollout of the jab in a similar time frame. So they lowered, numbers there. The whole thing, when we know that all the rest of it is fake anyway, we know all that. But so these are doctored numbers to make them look lower that are still high. But this is also just kind of how they roll, right? So they trick you and then they tell you the truth. So if you have a brain, you read this article and you go, oh, the jab doesn't work. That's the obvious conclusion to reading this article. So from their perspective, it's like they've told you. Right, you're operating in free will. They've let you know hey, this isn't working. It doesn't work. It doesn't have the desired effect because, we're having a surge in cases after 70 something percent of the population is jabbed. So, it's just kind of how they roll in that. And then people then are always confronted with the next decision. Am I willing to keep my head buried in the sand still? And if they are, then they move on to the next step, right? And if they're not, then they've done us a great service in waking people up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always it's so fascinating to me how people either can't or refuse to associate the number of people getting sick and the rollout of the jabs. It's like, how can they not see this? It's like you're apparently protected against a virus, but you're not protected against me, who doesn't have a virus. And it's like those things don't compete. It's like they can't draw a logical conclusion there. And it's like, I think it's this fracturing of their mind when they've been living in such a state of unreality for so long. I mean, they've been, a lot of these people have been, and I go back to the Trump thing. It's like, well, if Trump says this, then it has to be the opposite. If it's this, then it has to be that. And so you can't go on like that indefinitely without some sort of splitting in your brain where you're not able to recognize truth from falsehood. When when you're living such a lie. I mean, I think that's how Alzheimer's and schizophrenia and that type of stuff happen so frequently, is because people are so believing in lies and falsehoods and false narratives that they can't actually then see the truth.
Yeah, heavy metal poisoning may play a role there as well.
A little bit,
yeah. Something I haven't seen much recently, and I don't watch news. I don't, so maybe it's happening and I'm just not aware. But I don't hear them talking about herd immunity anymore. That was something that was pushed very strongly, right, to get people to believe the insane logical fallacies that they put out, right? Like you're just talking about, hey, this will protect you from the virus, but it won't protect you from the virus if someone else doesn't also have the same treatment. Well, this is insane on its face, right? Like no logical person could look at that and not do anything other than just say, oh, you're an idiot, and walk away. So then the herd immunity idea was, I believe, rolled out. Obviously, this is an old concept, but was rolled out in this particular case to help with that, that logic to click in. Like, okay, well, we need to reach a certain threshold, and then it'll all go away. Okay, right. Well, we've reached that threshold long ago, right? And we're not talking about herd immunity anymore. Why? Because it doesn't serve the interests anymore, right? Like there isn't a paradigm that helps them now to be like, hey, we need to reach herd immunity and this will all stop. They're on to the next thing that'll make it stop, right? Now we just need the fourth booster, the 150, whatever it is, right? And then it'll stop. So, yeah.
Yeah. In Israel now, your green pass isn't valid unless you've gotten your fourth booster. And it's like, if anyone needs any further confirmation of the fact that this is only the first step in the process, like your first 2 doses is only the first step, and they're going to continue with this indefinitely until people either die or say no, then I don't know how else to illustrate that point to you, because Israel is one of the test cases where they have complete control over that population. I mean, have you ever seen like the periodically they'll do a remembrance of the Holocaust, and there's like this bell or some sort of sound that triggers this and then everyone stops what they're doing and moment of silence or whatever, and it's like they're living in a constant state of victimization where they're remembering how victimized they've been and how and it's just they're living in a state of complete control. The authorities have complete control over their mental state, And it's a real awful place to be, in my opinion, where, someone else can dictate your mood, your happiness, your decision making, anything.
Yeah, well, and that's a great, that point can be used to illustrate the point I was making earlier of whatever you create, out of whatever energy you create something, you're going to see the results based on that energy you created out of. Look at the formation of Israel, right? Like, the cabal after World War II. I mean, they decided it a lot earlier than that, but the cabal after World War II goes in and says, okay, we're going to create basically the military power base in this region, in this area. And, we're going to go in and create all kinds of conflict and strife and, issues. And then we're going to, so that was born out of an energy field of the cabal, right? It was born out of an energy field of wanting to use a geographic location for their own purposes. And it does, by the way, get into some very esoteric stuff when you get into like Jerusalem and the whole history and tombs and kings and pharaohs, and I mean it's a very there's all kinds of stuff going on there. But if you look at how was Israel created out of love and light and and good intentions? No, not at all. It was created out of a desire to destroy and control. So of course, what are you looking at now in Israel? You're looking at the results of that, right? This stuff is not complicated when you just sort of look at the energy signature of anything. You can understand what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's switch topics a little bit, talking Kyle Rittenhouse, and it also illustrates the great divide that we're seeing with society in general. We talk about it in terms of the jabs and the corona nonsense and all that stuff, but it's happening in so many areas of life and so many aspects of our culture. And this is just another one that I've mentioned the term, and it comes from a guy, Scott Adams, where he describes it's two movies on one screen. So we're watching one movie, they're watching another one. They're watching a horror movie. To me, it feels like I'm watching a comedy. There's some dark spots in this comedy.
Maybe like a horror comedy, like a scary.
It's still a comedy, because it's so ridiculous that but it's still there's some sad parts in this comedy, but it's still kind of a comedy. And here's another case where because of how it's covered, there is two very different opinions of what happened, and so. Prosecutors crash and burn in Kyle Rittenhouse case, but polarized America doesn't see it. So the trial of Kyle Rittenhouse increasingly seems like a legal version of the parable of the blind man and the elephant. So if people are unfamiliar with that, it was a bunch of blind men are touching an elephant. One touches the tail, one touches the trunk, one touches the tusk, one touches the stomach part, and they're all touching a different part of it, and therefore think that it's a different thing that they're touching, and so they disagree, they can't come to an agreement, they fight, and they kill each other. And it's because they were just touching different parts of it, or only being able to experience or see their part of it, that they can't see the bigger picture, that they're all touching an elephant. By only touching discrete parts of the animal, the men describe vastly different animals. In coverage of this trial, one would think that there were parallel trials occurring in Kenosha, Wisconsin. So yeah, it's the coverage of what's going on. I remember seeing a clip of a video where one of the witnesses who Kyle shot, I think, and didn't kill, obviously, because he's a witness now. But the defendant attorney, asked him a question. It's like, so only after you pointed your gun at him and charged at him did he fire at you? And he said, correct. And it was like, that's it.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it. It proves that it was self-defense. But that's not even, that clip is not shown anywhere on the sort of left-leaning mainstream media. So one consensus, however, is emerging. Things are not going well for the prosecution, but the reason for this developing failure depends greatly on what media you are watching other than the trial itself. It is either the product of systemic errors or systemic racism. So, that's systemic racism is what one side is trying to put forth, and I don't think it had anything to do with that at all. So Rittenhouse is facing six charges that range from first-degree homicide to a misdemeanor of being a minor in possession of a dangerous weapon. At this stage, the prosecution may celebrate even a misdemeanor conviction. Prosecution's bumpy start and finish. The prosecution stumbled out of the gate of the trial. Gage Grosskreutz was the third person to be shot by Rittenhouse. I can't pronounce his name. He admitted under cross-examination that Rittenhouse did not shoot him when he had his hands up after their confrontation. He admitted that it was only after he pointed his handgun at Rittenhouse and moved toward him that Rittenhouse fired. Likewise, a prosecution witness, Ryan Balch, testified that one of the other people shot, Joseph Rosenbaum, said that he intended to kill Kyle Rittenhouse. Other witnesses described Rosenbaum as belligerent or hyper-aggressive. There it is, right there. He was threatening to kill him, and he was belligerent and hyper-aggressive. And so, clear case, self-defense. Later, the prosecution called Richard McGinnis, a journalist with the Daily Caller, who was reporting from sorry about that. The prosecutor told McGinnis, I mean, you have no idea what Mr. Rosenbaum was ever thinking at any point in his life. You've never been inside his head. You've never met him before. McGinnis said, I never exchanged words with him, if that's what your question is. The prosecutor then pressed McGinnis on how he had no idea that Rosenbaum was thinking because it was complete guesswork, isn't it? That is when McGinnis delivered a haymaker noting, well, he said expletive you, and then he reached for his weapon. So there you go. He said fuck you and reached for his weapon. So that's self-defense. The prosecution's own medical expert, Dr. Doug Kelly, appeared to confirm that the forensic evidence of soot injuries on Rosenbaum's hand could be consistent with Rosenbaum trying to grab the barrel of Rittenhouse's rifle when the gun was fired. It got worse from there, including a glaring constitutional violation by the prosecution when Binger began his cross-examination of Rittenhouse by commenting on his decision to remain silent. The judge correctly tore into the prosecutor. Any first-year law student knows that you cannot comment on the silence of a Mirandized defendant after an arrest under the Fifth Amendment, let alone ignore a court order. And so, so number one, not only do you have witnesses corroborating the video evidence that it was self-defense, but you have, major constitutional blunders by the prosecution. And if you're watching left-wing media at this time, you have no idea that any of this is happening. You continue to hear, oh, he's a racist, he's a this, he's a that. He went there to, he was hunting people, he was doing all this, and you simply do not hear this side of the case. And what's going to happen is when he is found innocent of these charges, there's going to be a lot of anger and a lot of, probably rioting and looting and the rest of it. And so, yeah, that's, sorry about this.
All right.
So
That's
it's just
looking good though.
I don't know what's going on with this. So yeah, it's just another case where the two realities are so different from each other a, what the fuck? I'm literally not doing anything to do this. But yeah, so it's causing a split. People can't see the other person's or the other side's perspective. And it's just yet another thing that is dividing people into two civilizations. And, you know, I don't think the trial is over quite yet, but when it is, look out.
Yeah, to me, that's probably the most likely scenario that's being set up here is rioting. Because if you look at, and I don't remember the names involved, I don't pay close attention anymore to these things at all. But you remember the case in Minnesota where the white cop, supposedly put his knee on the neck of that guy, the porn star, drug dealer, rapist guy. And, yeah, he was in the porn industry. He had been arrested many times. He'd been to jail. And I'm not talking crap about him. I don't know the guy. Maybe he's a great guy, but he wasn't a savory character, at least from the info that we have. But when that guy died, there was a lot of evidence to me that sort of the fix was in that trial. Like there was a lot of evidence that there may have even been actors involved. There was weird stuff where, this happened during the pandemic when masks were, 100% used and none of the people standing around in the footage have masks on. Looks like it was shot in a different date. There's all kinds of weirdness there. Right. But it seems like the fix was in, right. The fix was in basically to convict this guy, and sort of, I almost view it a little bit as like, sort of lessening the faith in the justice system because there was so much evidence. Now, look, I'm no cop lover. So that's the other thing too, right? I'm not somebody who, I'm not bootlicker, man. I don't believe in authority. I'm a voluntarist. Like I don't believe in any of this stuff. But there's dynamics taking place. There's the situation that we're in, and we can't just snap our fingers and change that. So we have cops, we have these dynamics, we have laws, we have all this stuff. And within that context, from all the evidence that, was released, it seemed like there was more than reasonable, doubt as to whether, he killed the guy with his knee. And but he went to jail. It seemed like the fix was in. If the fix is in here, right, then it's the opposite. It looks like they're setting up riots. It looks like they're telling the people, the victim group, right, the victims who are so happy to be victims, right. They're telling that group that this racist lunatic murdered people basically in the streets. And so, yeah, of course, what happens when he gets acquitted, which obviously it seems that he will. Riots. And so that continues, their agenda of sort of a civil war idea, but just the split idea. And going back to that split concept for a minute that you were talking about, you can go all the way back and see the same thing. I remember even when I was, again, totally brainwashed, totally caught up in the liberal paradigm and the left-right paradigm and the whole thing. And, I remember having these conversations with my father and other people, 90s, early 2000s. If you're watching the same story on Fox News versus MSNBC, you're literally watching two completely different realities. Like they are not, they don't have anything to do with one another. So that split of, giving this group of information, this group of people, this information, that group of people, that information, so that they think the other side are insane and awful and then fight, that's been going on. That's been going on forever. The other thing that's interesting here to me, well, it's interesting too that article is in USA Today, right? This is as mainstream a publication as you can get, that's pointing this out. And then, the last piece is, can we tell the truth and still get people to believe the lies, right? That's a lot of what you see happening in general. And so USA Today is putting out an article telling the exact truth, while at the same time, they do everything they can to get people to believe the crazy lie. And if they can do that, then they've got you mentally, right? You've been defeated at that point. So we always see that paradigm popping up again and again.
Yeah. A serious question that I have is why is it that why is it that a news outlet that's on the left, why can't they say, oh, wow, look at this new evidence. I didn't see this in the past. Maybe I was wrong. What is, and so they're literally ignoring it at the minimum, right? So that they're at minimum, they're ignoring the new information, new evidence that they could be using to more accurately report on what actually happened. So if that's not their agenda, if their agenda is not to accurately report what happened, what is it and why is it not being accurate? Why are they lying to people, trying to get them to believe something that's false? And that false belief will incite anger and hostility and other bad feelings and intentions from the supposed victimized group. So why is it happening like that? I mean, I think I know it's kind of a rhetorical question, but for anyone who is, sort of trying to make sense of the world, start by asking the question, like, why would a news outlet stick to a narrative, stick to a side so ardently that they can't show evidence that would counter their original claim? Like, is it that they just can't admit that they're wrong? Is it that they are, have to be on a side? Is it because their bosses are telling them that? Like, what is the phenomenon that's happening to make people stick to a side regardless of what the facts are? Because to me, you show that clip of the person saying, yeah, did he is it true that he only shot at you after you pointed your gun at him and charged it or came towards him? He's like, yeah, correct. It's like, why can't people, what is holding them back from showing that clip and saying, oh, well, maybe we were wrong about this. Let's take a step back and look at examine the facts, because maybe we were wrong. Like, why can't they do that? I think I know, because it doesn't serve the agenda. But for anyone who's trying to figure out the world and what's happening and who the actors are and what the sides are and the narratives are, that's a good place to start. And it's sort of an unanswerable question, but yeah, I mean, that's the question. And it's not just the Rittenhouse case; it's with anything. They will take their side, stick to their side no matter what. And it's like, if you're getting your information from people like that, like, man, God help you, because you're not going to have a clear understanding of what is actually happening in the world. And if you don't know what's happening in the world, then you can't make decisions in your life to make it better and to, you just can't make good decisions if you don't know what's happening. So it's crazy to me.
Yeah, I think I want to talk about for a minute the other side, right? The people who are bought into what the news media is pushing. And I think a big piece is that they've been very successful, and a lot of this was done through feminism and through sort of turning men into women. But what they've done a great job of is getting people to turn off the logical brain and just react with emotions. So if you tell people stuff that gets them emotional, like racism is a great one, right? That gets people emotional. Like, this person is evil, right? They hate you just because of how you look, right? That's a tactic to get people emotional. And so, I was listening recently, I don't know if it was Rollo Tomasi or somebody else, but somebody was talking about the difference from a scientific standpoint, the difference between, in general, not across the board, but the difference between how men and women process information, process interactions, etc. And for women, it's instinct, then emotion, then logic. For men, it's instinct, then logic, then emotion. But if you can get men to have a completely emotional response to inputs always, or anyone, but then, then that person becomes highly manipulatable. Because if you can just get them upset, you can tell them anything after that, and then you can direct their anger, right, to wherever you want it directed. So yeah, I mean, I think
stop you right there for a second.
Yeah.
And so with the Black people in this country, sort of the Black community, if there is one, is a matriarchal community. The women run that society. It's 80% single motherhood at this point, and the quote unquote men who grow up in that world grow up in a very feminine dominated society where they're essentially taught and brought up like women, and they react very emotionally, and they are very, very easily manipulated. And that is in my opinion, one of the reasons why they're used as sort of pawns in this game to go out and destroy cities, to wreck property, to do all this stuff. And it feels like it's done intentionally, because that feminization of men and getting them to react emotionally rather than with reason and logic first is a devious trick, but I think one that's intentionally done to get them to serve their agenda.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. And those hooks, yeah, I mean, those hooks, they turn off the rational mind. When you get emotional, I mean, everyone's experienced this, right? You get mad, brain stops working. You might be able to fight good in that scenario. You might be able to react with violence or react with defense, react quickly and in a strong way. But, you're not going to be much use in a business meeting. You're not going to be much use navigating some situation that you need your mind for, because you're angry. And so, they've been setting that up forever, and that's how they roll. And it's another example.
Yeah. I think you had another point if you wanted to get to that.
No, I think I was done.
Okay. Well, yeah. So Brian O says, FYI, the little disruptions from kids are great confirmations that you guys are real loving fathers with beautiful, strong families. Well, thank you, Brian. I appreciate that. And
we try it. It's not always easy.
So yeah, life is not perfect, obviously, even for us, as hard as that may be to believe.
I have so many challenges in my life, brother. Always, man. That's life. It's just part of the journey.
Yeah. But yeah, I feel like the service that to the world that we can bring is a one that we've gone through the waking up part, the 5 stages of grief, all the trials and tribulations of someone who wakes up, and now we've come out of that in a place where we have the mindset to be free, be sovereign, live the lives that we want to live in a way that we want to live them, and also being sort of productive members and productive members of society, doing good, serving God, all that stuff. And so I think that's how we can benefit the world through what we're doing here. And it's fun.
Yeah, and I want to address something real quick. It's like, right, we live in this society now where if you point out differences between people or you talk about groups, right, you're immediately labeled as prejudiced, racist, sexist, homophobe, whatever it is, right? So you can't speak about things basically without being labeled as some sort of prejudiced individual. So for anybody who listens to this, right, who thinks Asher's now a racist because he said something about a group of people, right? Like Asher's wife is Black, like Asher's kids are mixed race, like there isn't, you have to be able to speak and have conversations and make generalizations without there being without being attacked. Because if you can't have those conversations, if there's subjects that are off limits to discussion, then you don't ever have sort of a marketplace of ideas where the awful ones can be shot down and the good ones can be, respected, because you're not allowed to talk about it. And so what then happens is then you can just label anyone who, and obviously we've seen this very strongly in the last years, you can label anybody who disagrees with you as racist, and then the conversation ends, right? Or one they've used for a long time is anti-Semitic, right? If you don't love the policies of Israel, right, you're anti-Semitic. If you make a generalization about women or about, homosexuals, or about anything, then you're against them, right? This is an absurd notion. There are differences between people, like there's differences in cultures and languages, in ethnicity and physical makeup. There's differences between people, and it's okay to talk about them. It doesn't make you racist, doesn't make you prejudiced, doesn't make you a homophobe. I mean, I can't speak for Asher, but I know this is true for him as well. We respect humans, people. I would never judge a person based on any of that stuff under any circumstances, because it has nothing to do with the content of who they are, right? Their character and who they are. But I will happily enter into discussions about groups and have discussions about, hey, with this, what's going on with this group? What does that look like? What does this look like? Those are good conversations to have. And for the so-called victim groups, right? For the people who have been convinced they're victims. And by the way, I'm not saying that just because someone has been convinced that they're a victim doesn't mean they didn't have a rough upbringing or a rough history in their family, right? We all come from our story. We all have our story. But for those groups that have been convinced that they're victims, they are in such a situation of being pawns in a game that they don't even understand. It's really damaging, right? Because, we've talked about this before, but it's damaging for all the psychological reasons, right? Because you're not going to be successful if you believe you're a victim, right? That's basically an impossibility. In fact, I would challenge you, right? Ask a single successful Black person, like, if that's how they feel, do they feel that they're a victim? Like, is that their mentality, right? You're going to, if you found a 1 out of 100 that agreed that they were a victim who's successful and happens to be Black, I would be shocked if it was any more than that, right? So for those groups,
Dyson.
Say again.
Michael Eric Dyson. He's
I don't know him.
He's one of those. Yeah, he's like one of those victim. He's kind of like an Al Sharpton type.
Well, right. Well, those guys make their money on that. Right. So that's a little different. So yes, you're right. That's a good example. Those guys are successful, so to speak. And they're the victim pushers, right? The race baiters and all that kind of crap. But so right. So the so-called victim group, right? They are actually victimized by being told they're victims, because that lowers their probability of success. But then it also makes them just totally manipulable, totally pawns in the game. So if you're a woman and you've been told you're a victim, if you're Black and you've been told you're a victim, if you're gay and you've been told you're a victim, whatever it is, if you hold on to that, now they can manipulate your emotions any way they want. You don't have to look at a person anymore, right? You don't have to look at the content of someone's character. You don't have to get to know them and see what they're all about. Are they honest? Are they moral? These sorts of things. You don't do any of that. You just hate them from the get because your emotions got manipulated because you're a victim and you were told that they were racist or homophobic or misogynist or whatever it is.
Yeah, no, that's 100% right. And victim mentality is one of the most dangerous things that you can have, because it'll only lead to your demise and your unhappiness and constant. If you derive your worth and ego and if you derive your worth and your ego from the fact that you are a victim, you're going to continue to look for ways that you can further that and get more respect or attention or admiration or something like that for being more of a victim. So it becomes this sort of spiral downward that I feel like it seems like a lot of people are taking. We're more, this group over here is more victim than this group over here, and so that's what's happening on the left right now. It's like they're in this victim Olympics to see which group is the biggest victim, and it's going to end up shattering themselves because the gay, trans and this, well, I have this other thing, so I'm a more victim than you. And it's just going to lead to a life of hell and misery for them. And so don't go down that path even for a second. Even if you were, genuinely victimized in some area of your life. Okay, well, all right, so that's over. Now I'm a survivor, right? And so much of this is about your mindset and where you decide to put your energies and put how you decide to view the world. You can view it as a victim, or you can view it as a survivor and as a strong person who's getting through this. Yes, this happened to me, but it's not going to define me. And so it seems like that's all too frequent. What people do these days is identify and embrace their victimhood.
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of the idea, right, that God doesn't make mistakes. So whatever situation you were given, even if you were raped, even if you're paraplegic, even if whatever it is, whatever situation you were given for a reason to progress, to learn lessons, to resolve karma, whatever it is. So there are quite literally no victims. Like there is quite literally no such thing. And that can sound very harsh, right, to people who are the victim of a murder or the victim of a rape or these sorts of things. But I don't believe God makes any mistakes. I believe that there are soul contracts. I believe that decisions are made, that there's karmic stuff at play. And there's also violations. Absolutely. Right. So someone can violate your free will and do horrible things to you, and they'll deal with the repercussions of that, but that lesson came to you for a reason. So maybe you were given some massive trauma so you could learn how to resolve a massive trauma, right? Maybe your bodily functions were taken away so you could learn what it means to interact in the world and be in control of yourself with only your mind. I don't know. I'm just throwing out things. But the point is that whatever situation you're in. It is what it is. God doesn't make any mistakes, right? So if you want to get angry about it, fine, but that's not going to help you in any way. You're going to end up those purple-haired feminists, screaming at some event because they're so angry, right? Is that helping anything? Are people agreeing with their point of view now because they're naked or something protesting, right? Or they're like, yelling at you. Is that something that's helping them in their life? Is it helping anyone in their life? No, not at all. It's just a victim whining about it. It's a fake victim whining about being a victim. There's nothing useful in that. And then the other piece too that occurred to me when you were talking, it's they've done such a good job at manipulating cultures to the point where they can literally almost make success a negative thing. Like I think back to, when I was growing up. I was born in 1982, so I basically grew up in the 90s, and that was like the era of like gangster rap and like what I would call more like hood culture, right? Like hood culture really like came to the forefront. What they call like urban culture or whatever. And if you look, and I got very caught up in that world, and took on those sets of ideals and beliefs and things like that. And if you look at that period of time in that culture and what it looks like, it celebrates violence, celebrates sex, celebrates drugs and alcohol, and all sorts of other stuff. And also, very much looks negatively at traditional success. So not only are you not only are you a victim, but within that, we want you to do things that are going to end up with you dead or in jail. Like that's basically like the paradigm that the 90s were, if you were caught up in that sort of idea. And so, that's a trick that got played on us, right? And so we want to identify that and see it for what it is, call it out and move on, right? And make sure that we are in control of our lives and that we are living successful lives on our terms and so on and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And they make it very easy and convenient for you to identify this, because then you can say, well, it's not my fault. You don't have to take responsibility. And what could be better than offloading the responsibility for your messed up life onto someone else? Then you always have something to blame. Well, it's not my fault. It's not my fault. I didn't do this, or I didn't choose this, or this happened to me, or that happened to me. And it's an easy, convenient thing. And if modern society has taught us anything, it's taught us that people will take the easy way out whenever they can. And so I think that is one of the biggest reasons why we are where we are in the state of humanity. It's because people lack that personal responsibility. They lack that sort of inner thought and inner recognition of their true power, of their sovereignty, and they would rather have someone else take responsibility for it, because it's too much for their fragile egos to admit that it was their doing. Their life is the result of their choices. And the messaging is so pervasive, to everyone on everything. Like, if you're a minority, if you're gay, if you're a girl, if you're this, if you're that, there's always that built-in excuse of, well, it's not my fault, it's because of this. And people are all too quick to blame someone else, blame some other thing for their own lack of success, lack of whatever in their lives. And so I think it's a big problem, and people need to wake up to that.
Yeah. The thing too, the important point I want to make in this is that the power and the freedom that comes from taking responsibility for every aspect of your life is phenomenal. Doesn't necessarily solve it, doesn't necessarily mean your problems will go away, doesn't necessarily fix anything overnight or anything like that. Over time it does, but it's incredibly freeing. I've had years of my life where I was sort of to some degree in the victim mentality, and you can have multiple aspects of your life, right? You could have 9 aspects of your life where you're not all in victim mentality, and have one that you are. And so when you're in that, when you're in that victim mentality, it's very out of control, right? You feel like you don't have control over this aspect of your life or over your life in general. It's like everything comes from outside of you. That's a shitty situation. Like, that's not a situation you want to be in, especially as a man, right? You want to be able to, have some dominion over, over your domain, over your life. Not that women don't either, but there's a little bit of a difference there. But, that's a terrible situation to be in. Now, the flip side of that, right? If you understand that literally every experience you have is on you, literally everything in your life is on you, everything. All of it, like your relationship with your wife, even if she's crazy, or your husband, if he's crazy, whatever, that's on you. Like your, whatever you're dealing with, your work, your opportunities that come or don't come, things that pan out or don't pan out, health challenges, whatever it is, it's completely up to you to change it if you want to change it, but it's yours. When once you understand that, all of a sudden, you can wake up in the morning and assess and be like, hey, yesterday I did it this way, didn't like that result. Today I'm going to try it this way, see what that looks like. Maybe it'll be better, and all of a sudden now you have power in your life. That's a much better way to live, than thinking that you're just sort of going through the world, being pushed around by the wind, by the current, whatever. And, and whatever happens outside of you is the most important thing. I mean, that's a good way to like waste a life, to just sort of get old and die and not really have, lived. Yeah.
Yeah. And people tie their ego, in a sense, it's their self, to this victim mentality, and to go away from it is literally killing themselves, because that's who they are. That's who they've identified with for so long. And if that goes away, then in a real sense, they're losing part of themselves. And for a lot of people, that's just too much for them. And
that's exactly right.
At some point, you gotta really make that choice or distinction, like who's going to be in control of my life, me, or is it, the behavioral scientists and data analysts from social media networks? Or is it going to be the government? Or is it going to be large corporations? Who's going to be actually in control of your life? And I promise you, when it's you, you're controlling your own life and your own decisions and actions and all that stuff, it's a lot more fun. So I think
you get to create what you want, right? I mean, that's the main difference. Like, do you want to create what you want, or do you want to experience what other people are creating for you?
Yeah, because someone has a plan for your life, whether it's your boss or the drug companies or the government or your corporations or something. Someone has a plan for your life, and it's, in my opinion, it's better off if it's you rather than someone else.
I mean, this has a very strong connection to sovereignty too, right? Like, you can't be a victim and be sovereign.
Yeah. Right.
And, and we're talking about this time where sovereignty seems to be like the whole game right now, right? It's like, are humans going to stand up and be sovereign, or are they going to go along with the agenda and descend into those results? So, these are intimately connected subjects. And again, this filters through to every single aspect of your life. There isn't an aspect of your life, speaking to myself, there isn't an aspect of your life where you can say, oh, well, in this case, I don't have the control. This other, it's out of my hands type of thing. Not that there aren't little situations, of course, but I just mean overall theme of your life, direction of your life, actions you take, relationships you have, your career, on and on and on. That stuff, you need to be in control of all of that. Otherwise, you are relinquishing sovereignty, and that has bad results. That's how we're in the state we're in the world. And and being a victim, or buying into the victim mentality idea, is a great way to get to that negative outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good place to end it for today. Please like, share, and subscribe. Please like our backup channel and our main channel. We're going to be on our main channel back there on Monday. Our suspension will run out tomorrow, so we'll be back on our main channel. But long term, please join us over on Rumble, and also please join the Telegram chat. That's a great way to get in touch with us. Suggest shows. Put stuff in there that you want us to comment on, and it's a great way to build a community. Any last words?
Well, you had read some comments to me before the show from a show that we did on sort of men and women and those dynamics, and a lot of women had some really positive comments that you were pointing out to me. That was cool. I appreciate that for those commenters, if you're listening, and I'm really glad that we could provide some value.
Yeah, absolutely. So please comment, like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff, and we will see you on Monday.